International Press Institute has raised fresh concern over rising cases of media repression in Nigeria. IPI Nigeria President Musakilu Mujid sounded the alarm at a dinner in Abuja to honor Ajia Hadiza Hussein Sani, the retired director of digital media at Voice of Nigeria. Her twin sister, Hajia Amina Hassana Sani, also retired recently as director of the news agency of Nigeria. Mujid cited recent incidents such as the banning of live political programs in Kano, the eviction of Channels TV crew from the Akwa Ibom Government House Press Center, and the arrest of journalists in Ekiti and Lagos. He described these as part of a disturbing pattern of harassment and censorship of the press. He urged stronger advocacy to defend press freedom and protect journalist rights, stressing that independent journalism is vital for Nigeria's democracy. Since President Bola Tinubu took office in May 2023, authorities have increased pressure on the media. Journalists have faced arrest, abductions, detentions, and harassment, while new laws and proposed regulations have raised concerns over press freedom. Well, for a discussion on the alleged repressive actions against the media by the present administration, Fidelis Mbah, Deputy President, International Press Institute, joins us now from Enugu. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsday.
Thank you very much.
So what would you say is responsible for this rise in cases of media repression in Nigeria that the IPI is talking about?
Thank you. In recent months, in recent weeks, we've had cases of more arrests of journalists. We've had cases of media houses coming under serious threats. And we feel that this is just public officials trying to flex their muscles, trying to ensure that the media is actually silenced, because there's actually no justification for, the attacks on the press, and there's no justification for the arrest of journalists who are doing their jobs. We are not holding forth for maybe any journalist who crosses the line, but we're saying follow the prescribed legal framework, for addressing such issues, and which is seek for redress when you feel that maybe a report infringes on your rights or that a content is not, in good taste. So rather than resorting to guerrilla tactics of picking up journalists, arresting them, and just keeping them perpetually detained, you should actually follow the right channel. That's what we're talking about.
Mr. Fidelis, what would you say are the dangers of not addressing this concern that the IPI has come up with, particularly for Nigeria's democracy?
Well, one of the major issues here is when the press is being repressed, and journalists are being hounded up and down, it actually results, or rather impacts, on the public perception of public institutions and public officials. Because when you give out information, they feel, the rate for them to be able to believe what you're saying is more like reduced, because they feel like maybe this has been filtered or maybe this has been influenced. But when you allow independent journalism, it encourages for people to actually more like hold government officials accountable. But in this case, with what's happening, journalists are even scared to report. And that is actually something that is not really encouraging, especially giving, recent reports about human rights violations and also repression of the media in Nigeria.
Could our laws also be contributing to this repression that you've talked about? For instance, some analysts believe there should be a review of the Cybercrimes Act and the embassy codes, saying that these have also contributed to restricting media freedom. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, we actually feel that some clauses in the Freedom of Information Act, more like the Cyber Crime Act, should be kind of like maybe either toned down or amended, because some of them are really, really repressive. But again, that people are, supposed to okay, if you feel a journalist has offended you in any way, or maybe a report is not favorable, you should approach the court. That's the normal thing to do, rather than taking the laws into your hands. So it's not really about, the Constitution really aiding these people, but it's just people being driven mostly by ego, and also the fact that they feel they can get away with anything that they do to journalists. Like recently, a top member of the NAWAJ, which is the female wing of the Nigeria Union of Journalists, the lady was assaulted while covering an event at the Nigeria Railway Corporation. Though the Director General later came to apologize and even made her an ambassador of the corporation right now. But again, that is one of the few cases where public officials are able to recant or more change their position. And that has already instilled fear in journalists because they feel look, which report am I going to do now that won't offend public officials? And again, won't I be arrested? So it's actually killing investigative journalism in Nigeria.
Well, in the meantime, I'm wondering what support systems are currently in place for journalists and media organizations. Also, how do you think they can remain committed and professional despite this harsh environment that you've spoken about?
Well, we as IPI, we've always tried to, we engage in advocacy programs, and I know that, there are a lot of training programs for journalists across the country, just for them to be able to remain resolute and remain committed to delivering their professional job, despite this thing. Because not only in Nigeria, we have cases of other developing countries where we have, media repression. So for us here in Nigeria, we're encouraging journalists to more stick to the facts, so that nobody, even if they take you to court, they won't be able to say anything. Because sometimes some of those who get them arrested is just because they feel the news is not favorable to them. Not like the news is absolutely wrong, but they just want to flex muscles because of their connection. And also, security agencies are culpable in this case because how do you explain where an individual just picks up a phone, calls the commissioner of police of a particular state, and then a journalist is arrested and kept in detention for even more than 30 days, which is against the law. So for us, we'll just try to keep advocating for press freedom and also to offer training, not just us, other organizations who are offering training for journalists.
So what steps really will the IPI like the federal government to take to promote media freedom and of course protect journalists in Nigeria?
Well, for us, we are calling the federal government to ensure that journalists practice without any form of harassment or intimidation. Just create an enabling environment for journalists to practice and for media houses to feel safe, to be able to report, and for independent journalism to thrive, because everybody cannot be, favorable to the government. Not like maybe it's deliberate, but I mean, if government is not doing the right thing, as the fourth estate of the realm, journalists are supposed to question things they feel is not normal and also hold public officials accountable.
Now, this media repression that the IPI has identified, has it in any way affected the work of journalists or the operation of media organizations in Nigeria so far?
Definitely, because, definitely you have cases of journalists now, shying away from investigative reporting. Most of them are just now waiting for press releases, press statements, press conferences. They no longer want to do news behind the news to actually ascertain what the problem is. And then even some of them, because they're afraid that if you might go investigating and in the course you'll be arrested. We have a case in point, which is in Ekiti State, where a journalist was arrested simply for asking questions and for doing a report about alleged sexual harassment by a professor. So if the professor feels strongly that, look, this report is in bad taste, I think the right thing to do is to approach the court and not to get the journalist arrested. And now, even after he's been released, they're now trying to summon his editor to show up in Ekiti. We have a case in point as well, which is a journalist, Nasir Yelwa, who was arrested last week during the protest by Shia members in Abuja, just because he was among the crowd and was following them to report their procession. He was arrested. And as we speak, he's been charged. He was brought to court on Friday, but the magistrate was not in court. And he was returned to SAS detention facility rather than even a regular police station. He's expected to be charged again today. So things like that are actually weakening journalists professionally, even things they want to do. They're a bit hesitant. And some of them, because of no backup option in terms of financial benefit, some of them will just like, okay, let me just leave this because this might get me into trouble. And beyond, people advocating for my release, who will be there to stand for me? Even though as IPI, what we've done is try to ensure that any journalist who is being harassed or intimidated will go to any length to ensure that the journalist is freed from detention.
In the meantime, what role do you think the international community can play, in supporting media freedom in Nigeria?
Well, the international media, they've been doing their part, which is more like joining in the advocacy and also offering training. I mean, the role basically is more from the Nigerian government perspective, which is ensure that the legal instruments are not repressive and ensure that people don't use state institutions to harass and intimidate journalists. We've had, international organizations coming in to offer trainings. And for us as IPI, we recently set up a book of infamy that documents anybody who either aids or supports a repression towards journalism. And with that, what we intend to do is, if your name is included in that book of infamy, we'll pass it across to embassies and consulates in Nigeria. And the wider implications, because that might result in visa ban for some of these public officials who think they can get away with anything in Nigeria, and then also other repercussions internationally.
So just before I let you go, are there lessons that Nigeria can learn from other countries that have successfully promoted media freedoms and protected journalists? What are these lessons?
Let's not even go very far. I mean, a country like our West African neighbor, Ghana. If you go to Ghana, most journalists are free to really within the law, say things that they're supposed to say, write about things they're supposed to write. We're not even talking about outside Africa, places like South Africa, places like Kenya. So I feel that our government should be able to study the media laws of those countries and also look at laws governing press freedom in those countries to ensure that if these laws are a bit favorable and the conditions for journalists to operate is very conducive, it will actually more like give a boost to both the profile of the government in power and also ensure that Nigeria's name is not listed among countries with human rights violations, especially when it concerns press freedom.
Mr. Fidelis Mbah, Deputy President, International Press Institute, thank you so much for joining us on Newsday.